about to vote for or has voted
Look
for.
at B too. B says, no person shall be communicate at any time to any other person information obtained in the polling unit as to the candidate to whom a voter is about to vote or has voted for. So when they go brandishing what
there is a penalty though.
That's wrong.
In 4. Yes. There is a penalty.
So
if you're found in that area, it says any person acting contrary to the provisions of this section commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a maximum fine of 100,000 or imprisonment.
So we're back to that question of consequence management. Who enforces this and ensures that the person who's gone wrong on the other side of the law is punished?
So that's why we make the point that if the law enforcement officers who are going to supervise this election are supposed to take an oath, and the man who should get them to take the oath is saying they have already done so.
And that oath is different from the oath of office.
According to the law, the law that we have, not the one we created.
True. You know, if you could also weigh in and help us out here. For INEC officials, what are they supposed to do at this stage? If someone goes there and brandishes who he has voted, do they have the power to say, no, that's not right, I countermand this vote?
The person has the courage.
Do they
it takes a lot of knowledge, courage, and presence of mind. You saw how that polling unit was, for example. Now, he has to, that's the difficulty in the polling officials. Their primary function is to conduct the election, not to go spotting infractions and pointing to things. Really, what he should do, the presiding officer should do, is direct the security officials, say, look, please guide those people, tell them they are breaking the law, and if they don't comply, walk them out or arrest them. But you can imagine an attempt to arrest a person at that particular polling unit. That shows the practical difficulties in implementing the law. But the law has stated it. We know what the law is. Everybody should be familiar with it. Everybody should comply with it. So the primary duty is to conduct the elections, but he can direct. But at the same time, he has to manage those who have, the crowd who have come there to vote.
But isn't that also, I mean, there are layers to this, and perhaps Mr. Enolego also can weigh in if he may, because there are demarcation. The section where the polling officers are demarcated clearly. The portion where the ballot boxes are placed, even the cubicle are demarcated. Now, if the polling officers does not have the courage, that is the other layer is the security officials who are standing by to say this is how this process must be done. But clearly, it does look to me that a lot of the people we saw in those videos, in that image, they do not understand the section of the law. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why we're doing this kind of public engagement or education.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, if they are aware of the consequences of their action, even gathering around the man, will perhaps not do that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think also he went straight, I don't know whether on the grounds of being an elder, he's excused from standing in a queue. We don't expect, I mean, the culture is that the big man of that stature, you don't ask him to stand in a queue. But the force of personal example here, if you see a presidential candidate who has that humility and modesty to stand in a queue, and when he gets to his turn, even if he came with some people to tell them, please stay there, let me complete the process. That for me will be the force of example that others are likely, especially if the media and the society play up that force of example, it becomes something for us to model for others.
All right. We have some other eyes, right?
And speaking about the laws, I know that Zamfara, EFCC, they're keeping very close watch on people just in case you have some sort of ideas in terms of whatever you want to do at the polling booth. But
the slogan, you know what the EFCC says? Wherever you may be, EFCC will get you. So maybe they've got it to Zamfara this time around. And some people are caught in the web in Zamfara State. This is the operation of the EFCC in that place. You can see men in their popular red attire. You don't want these guys to pounce on your compound, come tailing or come for you. So They are there and perhaps carrying out their duties. You remember when the FCC chairman was talking about all of this? He said
those who they captured and what INEC was supposed to do in terms of the role they should play.
You know, he said those who return money they've contravened the money laundering.
This is simply for deterrent. We saw them at the
in Ekiti and Osun.
No, not Ekiti and Osun. Before Ekiti and Osun, they were here at the federal capital, observing the primaries of the political parties and the drama that followed it.
Was it effective?
That's the question for you. So the point for me is until we stop this drama, because you have seen the red clothes. Maybe it serves as deterrent. People will say, "Oh, EFCC is around," but at the end of the day, like I said, how many people from Ekiti to Osun and Abuja? How many people can we go to the EFCC website and say they are currently being prosecuted
for vote buying,
for voter inducement or vote buying?
The FCC chairman said in Ekiti and Osun they're already prosecuting. Only
I can go to their website.
only that they caught out procedurally. They caught out to go and get the fire out of INEC before they can prosecute that case. And one of the issues about Election Offences Commission, which we discussed earlier, that will be, because the question is on who lies the onus at the polling unit.
You are a lawyer in equity. They act the police. They act setting up the police. Said the police should enforce all laws. Number 3.
But there's no lawyer in equity. This is a lawyer of long standing.
All these
gentlemen, can we just? I don't know if we said the AIG is there, Mr. Enalego, to weigh in on this matter of.
Okay, he's not there yet.
Let's hope we can get him back.
I think we also have visuals from Kano.
Kano, absolutely.
Yeah. They're also voting in Kano, guys. Yeah. Let's take a look at what's happening there as well, because our cameras are just going across different parts of the country to see how are the voters turning out, what are they doing, what's the mood where they are. So look at that. That is Kano. I hope that's not.
A sea of
it looks as if somebody's having a hard time trying to will those sea of heads in line or something.
So if they say, this is
Malami.
It's called Malami in Kano.
Malami, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I wonder who they're carrying there.
Well, Mr. Uzi is the one to help us out here. I don't know what possibly could be happening here.
The particular cameraman who took this picture was actually trying to give us the true definition of sea of heads. So if there is if there's any interpretation of sea of heads, this is perhaps what we're talking about.
But interestingly too, at the end of the day, all these visuals and images we see, it comes down to what you count with the ballot. So these images may not be naturally true reflection.
But again, by the provision of the guidelines and the law, the electoral law, correct me if I'm wrong, no polling unit should have more than 1,500, isn't it?
No, actually, I think it's 750.
Yesterday,
there is a delineation.
Said, that delineation. Yeah. So per PU, I think it's about 750.
750. It was initially 1,500. But it's now been cut down to 750. With those ads that I'm seeing right now, those are in almost 1,000. So,
first of all, we don't know how many polling units that there are in that location. Because in particular locations, there can be more than, as the last one you saw from Itama, there are 3 or 4. So there can be more than, we don't really know. That's why it's always good to get some background information.
And there are people who are under
8,400. Yes, there may be some underage from what we see.
Unless they were not supposed to vote. But if they didn't come out to vote, if they came out just to be part of
should they be there
to
if
be
you don't
part
have
of
a
crowd of things happening, maybe they accompany some people, but it's something to look out for.
All right, guys, this is the presidential candidate of the APC, Bola Tinubu. This we understand is in Ikeja area of Lagos, around his polling unit. As you can see him there with his daughter flanked on the right, and his wife, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, on his left. And of course, he's being guarded. I mean, I can imagine the kind of situation you saw there in Adamawa playing out in the Ikeja area of Lagos. This is a very popular area in Ikeja area. I can almost describe this area, know it very well. I've covered this particular area before. This is just in between. This is along Iyala Street, just beside ShopRite area of Ikeja, just a street before his polling unit. And usually, whenever Bola Tinubu goes there to vote, it's always a very, very tough scenario meandering through that process. Let's listen to some of the sounds that could come out from that area. So, and I can imagine the kind of security that would be in that area, just compared to what you saw, also similar rather to what you saw in Yola.
Yes, I'll raise it. So yeah, move. Step out. The president. Let's step out. Let's step out.
Always, they've been expecting. I can bet with you that politicians and the supporters have been waiting here all day, just at this moment, to catch a sight of this man. This kind of a frenzy, and you can make a comparison. I have a feeling maybe the presidential candidate of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar, did not vote this time around in Jada. I get a feeling that he moved his polling unit to Yola. not quite sure, but we need to find out from our correspondent who covered him there.
Yeah,
but I mean, there were also contemplation whether or not Bola Tinubu was also going to move to Bodilon, where his house is, or whether he's going to vote. But we know for sure that this is Ikeja, where he's voting, and pretty much, seeing our cameraman try to meander through the crowd. In fact, no, I mean, this is a word press coverage that usually happens in this kind of scenarios.
Okay. So the thing is, you cannot vote where your polling unit, when you're not registered.
Just the question you asked me, like you see the NSDC officials, they are preventing certain people from moving further. Now we're approaching the polling units. They're trying to prevent those, I don't know what to call them, hangers on security, and limit the number of people coming into the polling units with him, which is the right thing, really.
And then you have to also enforce that to our open secret system, such that you don't show.
Mr. Osaze, yes, please. Again, this kind of scenarios, we've seen this in Yola, and we're seeing this in Lagos, and who knows where we'll see it again. And at what point in the course of amending our laws and implement, we don't have a dearth of laws. We have a dearth of implementation.
We'll be amending our minds now.
At what point do we get to where we'll see this kind of the guidelines and the laws being pushed into effect, so to speak? At what point do you think that will happen?
I think the bigger question is, as you have already acknowledged, that as it were, there are enough laws, there are enough regulations, and your images also come from abroad, where you see prime ministers going to vote or presidents going to vote, and it's just a simple, straightforward exercise. I think SNY has already nailed it in a good way, in an eloquent way.
Okay, so see this now. I'm sure he's even having a challenge getting to where he would even begin to the process of voting himself. I mean, see the crowd.
Absolutely, but look at the crowd. Look at the composition of that crowd. You have media, and the ones on the forefront,
the media would be
the security.
He's expecting that the media will be there,
and it's also expected that security people will be there.
Okay,
and others, as Shehu has already said, there are lots of people who are seeing him for the first time in years.
They've moved these polling units forward. This polling unit is now almost half a kilometer away from where it used to be. Now, this is at the tail end of the street. Anybody who is very familiar with this area, this is in front of the Place restaurant, just opposite ShopRite in the Ikeja area. And the polling unit where he voted the last time was down the street, just half a kilometer to this very place.
It may be delineation. It may be units. Don't forget 56,000.
Yes, some people got notification too that their unit had been split and then moved to a similar location.
Yes.
So this probably might be one of those scenarios where, in fact, someone is asking me, are you sure it's not fake news? But thankfully, Mr. Okoye was here that morning.
So skeptical.
He says, well, yes. I got a text myself because I'm a registered voter too. So
when was the last time you voted, Chamberlain? I mean, that's
another story for another time.
so that you not be charged for the of your civic duty. Now, the thing here is, so now we are back to the initial picture that we saw in Yola.
Correct.
It's almost an impossible task of getting this crowd off the faces of these guys.
Isn't he going to be worried that they will show his ballot paper?
Well, so that's exactly.
He's probably happy to do that, actually.
Oh, well,
where you go.
No, our first sense of entitlement, our big man syndrome. Yesterday, we were going to INEC offices, and we got to some places, and just because of how we appeared in the place, the security men opened the gates, and we just went in, and I was shocked. I said, there was no question of wind down. Who are you? What are you going to? Until we got to the third place, where the security men knew their job, and they came out and said, hey, please wind down. What do you want? Who are you? We introduced ourselves, and they let us go. And I came down and I went to meet them. I said, this is what it should be. So the first challenge we have is that we have a ritual of voter education. I call it ritual of voter education and not civic education. So after this election, nobody talks about how people should behave. So the curriculum of the child who is already in school should be talking about, if you are 18, you now need to vote. This is the way you should vote. This is how you should vote.
And, you know, we had consequences of this now, because remember the bombing for the police headquarters not long ago?
Yes.
There was a brand new car, followed the IGP's convoy, they threw the floodgates open, and then bang, that went on. Go ahead. Yeah, you wanted to make a comment on
the
this?
candidates trying to push back or demonstrate that people should give him some space, and that's the proper thing to do.
I have, each time I have a certain kit that I use for every voting. I don't wear them every day. I've had to change my election duty shoes almost at every election. So in this kind of scenario, people will step on your leg. It's almost an impossible task. And sometimes I just pity some of these guys, because I mean, if you're not there, you cannot understand. You cannot disperse them. It's almost difficult to do that. A lot of the times, 3 police officers placed in these polling units cannot do the job. And it's just, I mean, it's unbelievable sometimes the kind of things that you see. Look at the voting cubicle. It has been collapsed. Look at it. It's pretty much collapsed. This is in fact looking worse than what we saw in Yola.
And don't forget, INEC officials too, they are also part of those who we should also think about how the kind of challenges, the ad hoc officials, what they go through. And I think these are similar cases where I think INEC usually has this talk amongst the members of staff or ad hoc staff saying, listen, when you find yourself in certain kind of scenarios, they usually advise them in terms of how, because first of all, their safety is paramount. They need to be safe first and foremost. But I mean, we all know, so there you go. They know that this is a scenario that shouldn't be. That's why they're trying to cover what he's trying to thumbprint to enforce that open secret ballots. But look at the pictures there. They just won't let off.
I mean, I just really remember what the Bible says about getting into heaven. It's like this is not the eye of the needle. This is like the nosary of a needle, because I think it's tighter than the eye, and it's almost impossible because
Bishop.
So. All right, we understand now that the presidential candidate of the Labour Party is already also out just about the same time. I mean, pretty much around this time is when you find the presidential candidate, because they usually give about an hour and a half or 2 hours for people to get out, get the right crowd out there that will engage them. Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, we understand, is getting out now, because we went there at his polling unit to give you live pictures of what was going on. I guess in another few moments we'll be able to go live to Ogulu in Aniocha local government area. Agulu, right? Yeah, I mean, there's Ogudu in Lagos. I mean, I've lived too much in Lagos, so maybe. So Agulu in Aniocha local government area of Anambra State, where the Labour Party candidate will be casting his ballot. But some other reports coming, some part of Lekki, the reports saying that there's still no sight of polling officials yet. Some part of Yaya Abato in Ogba area of Lagos also, no sign of polling officials as at this time. Some part of Gwarimpa also, there are those who are reporting that there are no sign of polling officials.
Also, a bit of some news in Lagos, for instance. There are reports of skirmishes here and there. Some people attacking voters who had voted for not voting for their candidate. I think.
How did they know they didn't vote?
Exactly. So that idea of who did you vote?
They had magical eyes. And I hope somebody has not planted a secret camera in the cubicle.
Another reason why we're here for voter education and public awareness. But I think voter education is one thing that. How would you say Nigeria has carried on the area of voter education the public?
Nigeria or INEC? INEC has
I'm not going to INEC. I'm going to responsibility.
Yeah,
exactly.
Chief responsibility.
Yeah. Chief responsibility. It's in different, and I agree with you.
Let
INEC, the media, and even the political parties.
Yeah.
And they have been a culprit of not even doing their duty. In fact, they're supposed to have
primary.
The primary is supposed to be the political
They're supposed
parties.
to have a unit on voter education.
So,
and they've
Prof,
left it all to the media and the INEC.
Let's hear Prof.
So we are the whipping boys.
I think actually it will not be fair to say there has not been good voter and civic education.
How much of it?
If you look at what happened, even celebrities got involved. Places of worship got involved. So it seemed that many saw this election as something unique. And everyone, in fact, there was a story of some churches who threatened not to let in people if you couldn't show your PVC.
I know of one where if you didn't have your PVC, you were not allowed to take the Holy Communion.
It has happened.
So I think that the issue there, Kwafo, is not whether the education is offered, but whether it's internalized, whether it is believed. For example, you're just asking somebody who is angry with the system to be patriotic. It's not going to happen, because you first have to address the reasons why the person feels alienated from the state.
Is that admissible in law?
No, this law is one thing. That's why that is what I meant by whether rules are obeyed. Because people feel it is the right thing to do, or because of the fear of sanction. So sanctions in themselves, yes, they can be a deterrence, but they cannot help in the process of habituating rules. If people, for example, don't believe that their votes count, or they're angry with the entire voting system, you can preach to them from here to thy kingdom come. It's not going to make a difference.
I know that this might be, I don't know if it's a little early, gentlemen, having been in the field yourselves, from the images you've seen, perhaps, I don't know if you have any reports previously from anywhere. Is it too early, or is it appropriate to gauge your expectation in terms of an assessment so far of the process, how it's going, or is it too early in the day? We know it's not even yet 11 or 12.
Yeah, I think the PVT the parallel vote tabulation that is being done by Yaga will have made the call. My phone is not here. I'm sure they will have sent in something on the opening of the polls. Perhaps if we have a little break later, I should be able to do that. But I was talking about at a point, the fact that if you stack sets of plastic chairs here, if you come in, you are going to see everywhere filled with plastic chairs. But when you take a count, you'll be shocked that what you thought was very big may eventually be small. And that is what the experience in the field has always been. I've had colleagues who go out and say, oh, there was impressive turnout. And that is not compared to the voter register for that particular polling unit. So when you say impressive, it has to be qualified.
So those are relative terms.
They are relative terms. And the reason why we have to be careful in the use of those terms is that it's also a trigger for expectation. So when people hear that there was impressive turnout, and then the real count is done, and it looks like they say, oh, the process has been manipulated.
In fact, those adjectives are not professionally right to use to qualify the situation at a time, because time and time again it has shown that what you see is not a true picture.
We were not shown, and we saw this. Many people who gather, and Prof alluded to that. Many people who you see in the polling areas are not voters. Many who you see there are food sellers in most of, if your camera goes a bit into those places, many of them are food sellers. People come there to eat. There is excitement. I knew this man ate fish and bread
absolutely. I had to feel I wanted to be
it's part of the voting experience.
So the excitement I'm talking about, so when you see all of that come together, and you say
patronize the local economy,
it's a trigger and it's not correct. And for Abuja, we were talking about.
So sorry if I may interrupt you. You're saying that the fact that there's a crowd of people there does not necessarily translate to the number of voters that came.
Absolutely.
And it has always
it's a standard. If you are an election enthusiast, you will know that this is factual.
So how do we get that streamlined so that those who are not part of the voting process?
It is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
By the time it is 2:30 and there are more people on the queue, until the people who are on the queue have voted, you cannot close.
I think part of the point, what I get is this, that the language used on the day, especially for those who are in sensitive positions where lots of people listen to them. So if you use certain language to describe certain scenario, it could be misleading. Because remember, in social science,
it's often misleading.
Meanings are not in words, meanings are in people. So you could say a certain thing, and science has shown that, look, people internalize words in the way they want. So it will re-emphasize the impression, the prejudice they already have. They are looking for validation from certain quarters. So if you use those words,
conducted an election in the Tusa local government, if you remember.
Absolutely.
And I think it was a by-election.
It was a by-election.
It was a by-election. And there was no restriction, Prof.
Okay.
INEC did not put any restriction. You can come in and vote. It was yet the lowest election in terms of turnout.
Yeah,
so
it was less than 5%.
Less than 5%.
About 2 something, less than 3% actually.
So when you are going to a place like Ikoyi, many of the folks who are there have left the country. They have traveled.
Etiosa is actually densely populated.
And we are talking about Maitama. You are talking about Maitama. Maitama runs together with Pape. And many of the folks in Pape registered in that very location that you are talking about. So if you go and interrogate, you find out that most of the people in the Maitama place, if you had gone to the airport 3, 4, 5 days ago, you will have seen them going to say it is from there they are on social media talking about election in which the people. So there are many things that play in this. So we need to be very cautious in the use of words when we are talking about turnout and all that. And that's why I said we should be more interested.
In fact, as a standard, right on China's television, the word large voter turnout is been abolished because because over time we've realized with experience that this has not been true. We're getting back to Ikeja, isn't it?
Yeah.
With Bola Tinubu and the APC candidate, who is we're monitoring what is going on in relation to his wanting to cast his ballot, which is looking like a Herculean task. I think he's done that and he's getting back into his vehicle from what I can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're sitting in Ikeja around the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress. Obviously, he's finished voting, and because of the crowd, it was really difficult for the cameras to catch him going through that process. But we see the last part of that footage before we came back to us, he was somewhat like heading out. Again, that crowd.
The Prof said this is their oxygen.
Whose oxygen? The oxygen of the people or the politicians?
No. I've been asked, but Prof is right.
Because that's the adulation they need.
Yeah, Prof. A politician had told me, look, if you come down from your living room and you do not have at least 50 people waiting for you,
the glory has left you.
And you remember the popular saying by the former president that the phones are no longer. So the patronage that you get shows how much of influence. Look, this politician, for some of what we have covered and seen, and being a political journalist who have gotten you closer to see some things, you get to a politician's residence and you see 40, 50 people on a daily basis. That's where they report to, and they feed them, they patronize them. These are patronage is the language of the political
they are
business.
Out of power, or for example,
the
ones that do not succeed in this round, go back 2 weeks later, you will be able to.
Of a politician, maybe an political appointee, and that while he's going, he hears that the person has been removed, that he will just carry his car and go.
Oh dear. It's that bad.
If we're talking about things like that, one of the reasons why INEC has always clamored for extension of time for campaigns, for nominations, so that it can plan better. And for a long time, the politicians opposed this. And one of the grounds they said was, look, this is a very expensive business. You're talking of reducing the cost of elections. Now, the number of people we have to feed, allusions to what you're saying, the number of people we have to feed, things we have to do, if you extend that time, will be double and triple, and that means we are spending more money.
The patronage is expensive.
It is expensive.
Doesn't that speak to part of the challenge you have in a democracy where there's zero-sumness? That's why if they win and get in there, chances are that they want to, quote unquote, recoup whatever they think they've spent.
Yes, the next question, why is it not like that in other crimes? Is it the same in other crimes?
But American system is similar. You know? American system is similar. American conducts election every 2 years. There's midterm election,
correct,
and there is the main election.
Well, do the politicians spend as much money and do this patronage and entertain the electorate in between?
Well, they do spend, maybe not as much, but we haven't double checked.
$4 billion US dollars that was spent in
most of it goes to advertisement. A lot of it goes to advertisement.
But again,
and you have a lot of volunteers. So you don't pay those volunteers.
Some of the funds spent in lobbying are not officially captured. The lobbying has been captured in American politics is similar to some of the kind of trading that we see with politicians here in Nigeria, and perhaps it shows just how. The election commission in America basically monitor funds. Doesn't conduct elections. Similar, compared to the election commission here in Nigeria that conducts the election. So, American election is perhaps one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive election and politics around the globe. Yes. But Nigeria tries to mirror it. But do we have what it takes to be able to mirror it?
Let me just put it in there. And it's expensive everywhere. We've all agreed that electioneering is expensive everywhere. But the angle of or the direction of the expense is what's in question. So maybe you
that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Okay.
In the Western world, if Sean is elected now as governor.
Why not president?
Let's even say that.
As a president, that's because this man right here.
The next time Chamberlain is going to celebrate birthday, he's going to invite you, and you are expected to pay your societal tax, unquote. You are going to leave an envelope.
A social equity,
and in your own community, you see people. When they do burial ceremonies, in fact, you get constantly become chairman of one occasion or the other, and none of them comes free. So, which is why, when people complain about the payment, about the perquisites of public officials here, and say, look, the salary of a senator here is XYZ, in the other place is YYY. It's comparing apple and oranges, because even you, the critic, you are the one who will probably invite the same politician and say, look, we are endowing an office here, we are endowing this. And if that person, donates a certain amount of money, you go and say he's tight-fisted. In fact, one of the presidential candidates was known that if you knew him before and you invite him to a function, he will attend and put 2,000 naira in an envelope. It becomes something of fun. So I think we are partly responsible for that. The societal culture of dash and give me and the expectations.
I'm saying a scenario where we are gradually, if the more election counts, you will discover the patronage will reduce because it's not going to be more of a transactional enterprise where people will probably go more after quality and more reasonable than going into people who can pay them to vote. That is my view about.
So motivation is important. What is motivating you? What is the idea? The challenge, Prof, is that you didn't have a house. You were living in my neighborhood, and you became a member of the House of Assembly. And within 6 months of your being member of House of Assembly, you have moved to these places we've been talking about, and then suddenly your children are out of the schools that my own children are, and then you have taken them outside the country. You have created a perception that there is much more in this other than service. So, and in my sense, I believe that you have taken what belongs to all of us to yourself, and then I can begin to make those demands.
You know, the man who they are looking to take over his seat as the president, we understand he's also voted a while ago. So that we'll get to also let you know much later as we progress. So that's how time flies for a lot of things, a lot of scenario where you were talking about some politicians, if they're going to you with something and they find out that you're off, you know, they turn back. But yeah, he's voted. There you go. He had said time and again that he wanted to ensure that there was free, fair